Today is Sanctity of Human Life Sunday, and that represents different things. For most people, it's strictly about abortion, right? It really also is about the practice of euthanizing people who are sick, which is a spreading thing over in Europe. And it's been brought up for a vote in the United States, 2 or 3 different places, where people who are chronically ill or who have, let's say, cancer end stages. But part of how this is operating is that people who are just feeling really bad on a given day, they're discouraged. Maybe they're depressed. They're feeling low. They could go into a doctor's office and say, hey, can you help me out here? I want to die. And that's something that's beginning to happen in Europe when they do these things. Another thing that happens is that people who are reaching the end of their lives and they're not altogether with it, sometimes their kids or their nieces and nephews might want to inherit a little sooner than they would otherwise. And so they, what are you doing, Aunt Jane? What are you doing? You're not having a good time anymore. Maybe you should go on down to the doctor. We'll take care of this, and it'll be, So there's all kinds of ways that these kinds of things can be just horribly disastrous. So today, usually I tend to talk about adoption, but I did a lot about adoption last year on Adoption Sunday. I'm going to focus more on abortion than I typically do. But we'll just start like this. After 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, the children of Israel had come to the edge of the Promised Land. They were camped on the east side of the Jordan River. And soon they were going to cross over under Joshua's leadership and begin to take possession of the land that the Lord had promised to them. And generations had gone by since this promise was made, and Moses was not going to be going with them. He was an old man now, and he was near death. He brought them out of Egypt and shepherded them through all the long years in the Sinai. God had already told him that he can't go with them into the Promised Land. He's gone as far as he can go. And with that in mind, Moses delivers a farewell address to his people. And in it, he reviews their history to this point. And he repeats the 10 Commandments. He lays down further laws. And he really exhorts them to obey the Lord when they finally cross the Jordan and enter into their new homeland. And at length he comes to an end. He says, he extends one further challenge. In just a few simple words, he crystallizes the choices that are before them. He says, this day I call heaven and earth as witnesses against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life, so that you and your children may live, and that you may love the Lord your God, listen to his voice, and hold fast to him. For the Lord is your life, and he will give you many years in the land he swore to give to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And those words that he uses, especially choose life, really resonate with me. Choose life so that you may live. What's the opposite? You can choose death so that you can die, right? It's a decision that has to be made over and over and over again. Will we serve the Lord and live, or will we turn away and die? Choose life. As I said, today is Sanctity of Human Life Sunday, and it's on our calendar to remind us that as Christians, we have been exhorted to choose life. Not every decision that we make in a lifetime has equal weight, okay? McDonald's or Burger King is only going to mess with how many minutes you have to sit in the drive-through line. One of them is faster than the other, okay? Coke versus Pepsi. The decision is not momentous, right? Except that I own a little stock in Pepsi, so if you lean that way, I'd appreciate it, all right? And it is just a little stock. But eternity does hang in the balance with some choices that we make, right? Not every single day do we get faced with a momentous decision. Not every decision determines our eternal destiny. Some choices do. Some choices are so clear that they set our direction for a whole generation, right? I'm not alone in thinking that this election that we're at the beginnings of is kind of that sort of moment for our country. It shouldn't be a close election, but it really, really could be. It's being decided more on who do we not want than who do we want. Right? Because I don't think most Democrats would prefer Biden, but they think Biden's the way to beat Trump. So a lot of the election is riding on who we don't like, right? Whoever occupies the White House over the next 4 years will make decisions that are going to guide our nation on into the future. So which way are we going to go? How are we going to make up our minds? What I want to tell you is to vote Christianly, okay? I've got 2 general exhortations for every person who hears this sermon. If you're old enough to vote, you should vote. If you're an American citizen and if you're registered to vote, make sure you go to the polls on the election days. I will not tell you how to vote, okay? I don't believe in endorsing candidates from the pulpit. We take stands regarding moral issues, right, based on what the Bible says. And we urge all our people to vote Christianly, okay? That is to vote with your Christian convictions firmly in view. But I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, all right? And I'm not going to ask you afterwards to fess up to who you voted for, right? That's between you and God. Second, I encourage you to pray about this election, starting already. It's not too late to start, and it's definitely not too early. Ask God to give the spirit of discernment to our whole country, all right? Remembering that the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, Proverbs 21:1. The politicians, they have exit polls and big rallies and, slick ad campaigns, but we have the Lord who has given us the gift of prayer. So let's use that gift to cry out to God for help in these critical hours. Now, as we think about the election, let's begin with the protection of innocent life in the womb. Right? Much of the bluster in this election cycle talks about gender rights and sexual rights, but I think the most important front in the civil rights war at this time is the right to life. And I think it's a paradox that, on the one hand, the need to respect human dignity and human rights is so vigorously affirmed by so many people, and on the other hand, the most basic right of all, the right to survive, is denied. To speak of human rights without protecting unborn human rights, to me, is base hypocrisy. I'm not very sophisticated in my thoughts on abortion. When I was a child, my mom became pregnant with a little sister for me who was born prematurely and died because she was not developed enough to live. And we mourned her. We thought about her every year on her birthday. We would go to the graveyard to visit her. I had a couple of years ago, I was talking to somebody. It was on the internet, so it was texting. But somebody had said something about abortion is just excising a set of cells, or a group of cells. And I said to the young lady, I said, "You don't believe that." And she got indignant and said, "Don't tell me what I believe." And I said, if a friend of yours called crying and said that she had lost her baby at 3 months, you would not comfort her by saying, "Honey, it was just a group of cells." You wouldn't, because it was this woman's child. And I think because I lost a sister at an early age, it's always been cemented in my heart that we're not talking about fictitious people. We're not talking about clumps of cells. We're talking about brothers and sisters, children, right? We're talking about people. So when I say I'm unsophisticated, I was 11 years old when Roe v. Wade took place. And I wrote a paper about it in school. And honestly, my thoughts haven't developed on it much beyond where they were then, It's not good to kill babies. That's what my 11-year-old self told my teacher. Our own Declaration of Independence declares that certain truths are self-evident. That all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, which, by the way, means that those rights were given by God. They can't be taken away by the hand of man. And what were those rights? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You can't pursue happiness and you can't enjoy liberty unless you have life. If the right to life is denied, liberty and pursuit of happiness are off the table, right? So to me, to speak of human rights without protecting the rights of the unborn is hypocrisy. Now, as I was growing up, I took interest in civics, and one of the things that I decided I would never be is a single issue voter. I wanted to have a more sophisticated approach to how I was going to vote. And honestly, today, one of the primary complaints made against pro-life voters is that we consider abortion a make or break issue in deciding how we're going to vote. Many people think it's wrong to be a single issue voter. I know that's how I felt when I was in high school coming up. They argue that you should consider all the issues in a larger context and then make up your mind. And that sounds reasonable. And on one level, it makes some sense, right? And it's, like I said, how I used to think when I was a kid. But here's the thing. If we want a balanced approach to our vote, we usually ask candidates, what are your qualifications for office? And sometimes that's the best way to proceed. Well, who's the most qualified, right? But I also think that sometimes we have to ask, what disqualifies a person from office? What positions can this person hold that are so wrong-headed that I would never, ever vote for them, no matter what other things they happen to believe in? And there are some of those, right? Obviously, those disqualifying issues have to be things of importance so that they might rule out a candidate from further consideration. Now, being pro-life is good as I see it, but that in itself is not enough to know if the politician is going to be good on the economy or on defense or on other forms of human rights. When we look at the flip side of that principle, sometimes we can see it more clearly when we flip it over, right? If a man says, I'm running on a platform that supports bribery as a matter of public policy, we would say that that guy was unqualified, right? Bribery is the way you're going to make your decisions in the White House? We would never want to vote for that, right? Or to take something more serious. Suppose he says that he believes that rape isn't so bad, and that we should repeal all the rape laws. Would you vote for that guy? I wouldn't vote for that guy. No. And I don't care what he believed about abortion if he held that stance. What if he openly proclaims himself as a racist and says that black people should be denied the right to vote? And he believes that slavery should be legal in America. Would you vote for that guy? I would never vote for that guy. Even if he said, and oh, by the way, I'm also pro-life. The answer would be no. So look at it from another perspective. Suppose that a man and a woman are in love and about to get married, and on the eve of the wedding, after the rehearsal dinner, he pulls her close and he says, honey, he says, I'm a strong believer in adultery. I think it's a good thing. And I'm just going to let you know that even though I love you, I'm going to cheat on you at every opportunity I get. Should this girl marry this guy? No, she shouldn't, right? And it doesn't matter what other good qualities he has. He brushes his teeth. He never comes to the away from dinner with broccoli stuck between his teeth. No, that doesn't count. Adultery is a disqualifying issue in marriage, and I think it's the same in politics. Pray and consider if there is a disqualifying issue for you. I believe that the endorsement of the right to kill unborn children disqualifies that person from any position of public office. I wouldn't vote for him for dog catcher. It's the same as saying that the endorsement of racism is okay, or fraud is okay, or bribery, right? All of those things should disqualify someone. We've got a lot of people who say, child killing is okay. I think about the words of Jesus in Matthew chapter 18, verses 5 through 7. And whoever welcomes a little child like this in my name welcomes me. But if anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a large millstone hung around his neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe to the world because of the things that cause people to sin. Such things must come, but woe to the man through whom they come. I believe there will be a terrible judgment from the Lord. By the way, I don't think it's my job to bring that judgment. So I'm not addressing these issues with dynamite and a rifle. Amen. That's not my job. Who makes babies? If you're a believer, where do they come from? God makes babies, okay? It's the continuous miracle of creation. Now, on the positive side, I believe that God takes personal responsibility for the unborn. Psalm chapter 139, verses 13 through 16 say, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed body. All of the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." I think this is the strongest statement on God's love for those before they're born in all of Scripture. How much does he know about the unborn baby growing in the womb? Absolutely everything. And like a skillful weaver, God takes the tiny hands and legs and joins them to the body. He forms the heart and sets it beating. He watches over the little thumb and makes sure it finds its way to the little mouth, Who makes babies? God does. You know that we have laws against intentionally wounding dogs and cats, right? You're not allowed to maim an animal. And there are laws that protect endangered species. But what about unborn people? An 8-week-old human fetus has a beating heart, an EKG, brainwaves, right? Thumb sucking, pain sensitivity, finger grasping, genetic humanity. But under our present laws, the preborn are not humans with rights under the 14th Amendment, which says that no state shall deprive any person of life without due process of law. Well, I wondered if the unborn do not qualify as persons. It seems like they should at least qualify as animals, like a dog or a cat. Why is it legal to maim, mutilate, and kill pain-sensitive unborn people, but not an animal? Under Roe v. Wade, which became a law when I was 11 years old, over 60 million babies have been legally aborted in our country. And since the law has changed, the numbers have dipped. But I want you to remember that even though Roe v. Wade is no longer the law of the nation, and even though some states have outlawed abortion within their states, people in every one of the 50 states can get abortion pills in the mail. Absolutely everywhere in this country. And the result, I think, is sort of like mental, moral schizophrenia, right? In America today, a 14-year-old girl cannot buy cigarettes, she can't buy booze, she can't attend an X-rated movie. In some parts of the country, she can't get her ears pierced or a tattoo without her parents' permission. But she can have an abortion or begin gender-changing processes. There's a professor at the University of California, John Noonan, who says that under the present law, human life has less protection in the United States than in any country of the Western world. In the words of Francis Schaeffer and C. Everett Koop, there are quotas on whales and porpoises, but it's always open season on the unborn. Listen, if you destroy the egg of a bald eagle, you could be fined $5,000. If you destroy an unborn baby, you'll make about $500. Here's the sad truth. The most dangerous place to be in the United States is not any bad neighborhood in Detroit or St. Louis. The most dangerous place to be in America is in the womb. You have a 1 in 3 chance of not making it out alive. The gospel is based on the truth. It depends on the truth. And preaching the gospel always involves exposing sin. Right? Because without that, we don't understand that the gospel is necessary. And I realize that there may be some objections to what I'm saying in this sermon. Okay? I suppose that some people would rather not hear about this when they go to church. They might say, "Brother, stick to the gospel." Well, that's a good idea. And I do stick to the gospel an awful lot. But the gospel is more than a ooey gooey nice feeling that you have Jesus in your heart. Okay?
Right.
The gospel is based on truth. It depends on truth. And preaching the gospel involves exposing sin.
Right.
That makes the gospel necessary. Because until we hear the bad news, we're never going to appreciate the good news. But won't this kind of sermon offend people? I hope so. Truth always offends somebody. But won't we turn away the very people that we need to hear our message? We're in a place that's like so liberal. Won't we offend people who need the gospel? That's possible. Okay? But turning away hypothetical people is no reason to compromise on the truth. Well, isn't there a danger that we might lose our tax exemption because I'm talking so politically? As a matter of fact, it's become a bigger issue nowadays. Not too long ago, I got a thing in the mail from the state of Vermont asking how much we insure our building for, so they know what figure to plug into the tax rolls when they begin taxing church properties. I dealt with it properly. I threw it in the trash. I did not answer that letter. And I found out afterwards that thousands of pastors around Vermont did the same thing because hardly anybody filled that paperwork out and sent it in. But there's nothing in the Bible about tax exemptions, one way or the other. And if we lost our tax exemption someday, we'd end up just like most of the churches on the planet who never had a tax exemption. Okay? A number of years ago, I encountered a book by Chuck Swindoll, all right? And he wrote on the issue of abortion. And, you know, in the book, at the time, when I read it, I thought he was off topic. Because most of the time, he was talking about sexual purity as being the primary issue. His emphasis helped me to understand that abortion stands as a symbol for my generation, the baby boomers, right? That has rebelled against God and chosen a path of freedom at all costs. So we turn to sex and drugs and rock and roll, and that rebellion has produced another generation with much less of a moral foundation than we were brought up with. And now another subsequent generation with an even less moral foundation than before. Abortion is a symbol for an anti-God lifestyle that says, if it feels good, do it. And if it's inconvenient, kill it. So, we take this in a slightly different direction. Is there life before birth? Let's return for a second to the core question. Is the unborn baby really a person, a human being? All right? Consider this. From the moment of conception, the baby has an individual identity. The baby has its own set of genes and chromosomes. Before implantation, the baby's sex has been determined. At 19 days after conception, the eyes begin to develop. At 24 days, the heart begins to beat. At 30 days, the unborn baby is only a quarter of an inch long, but already has a brain and eyes and ears and mouth and kidneys and liver. At 35 days, the little fingers have formed. At 40 days, brain waves can be detected and recorded. In the 7th week after conception, the baby begins to move on its own. In the 10th week, the baby squints and swallows and hiccups. He has fingerprints that will stay with him for the rest of his life. In the 12th week, the baby responds to touch and begins to suck her thumb. By the 4th month, her ears are functioning. Little baby can hear his mother's voice for the first time. By the 7th month, he can hear and taste and touch and recognizes his own mother's voice when he hears it. By the 9th month, when the baby weighs between 6 and 9 pounds, her little heart pumps 300 gallons of blood a day and is fully capable of life outside the womb if this child is given a chance. Do you think that everybody who's ever had an abortion knew those things ahead of time? Do you think they knew all of the implications of what they were doing? Famously, Jane Doe, right, the lady from Roe v. Wade, after she wrote an article for the New York Times about her abortion, and this is what she said. It certainly does make sense not to be having a baby right now. We say that to each other all the time. But I have this little ghost now. A very little ghost that only appears when I'm seeing something beautiful. Like the full moon on the ocean last weekend. And the baby waves to me and I wave to the baby. Of course we have room. I cry. Of course we do.
See, there's another passage of Scripture we ought to consider. It's a passing reference by the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 1, verse 31. This is part of a long list of sins of those who have turned away from God. The Greek word is astorgos. Okay, we're not familiar with that term, but I'll tell you what it means. It means without natural affection. And in some modern translation, the Bible will say heartless. Okay? And it was used in the first century for parents who had made the decision to take their baby and put them up on a hillside out in the elements so that they would die of natural causes. You know, when I first heard about that, I was probably a small child. I read a lot of Greek myth and fables, and this idea of somebody just being left out to die, it's always bothered me. I don't think that's a natural decision to make. To treat your own child with such callous disregard reveals that you're astorgos. You're without natural affection. And seen in that light, abortion is not just another sin, it's a mark of a depraved and godless society that Paul's talking about in that passage. The bottom line is this. I come to a simple conclusion. Abortion is wrong because it's wrong to kill babies. I've thought that for 40 years, right? It's as simple and as profound as that. And I know of no other conclusion that is consistent with Christian faith. We know the truth, so now what are we going to do? Now I'll remind you of the words of Dante, who said, "The hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in times of great moral crisis maintain their neutrality." This is not a time for neutrality. Okay? This is not a time to be a silent witness to what goes on. This is not a time to look away. Abortion is wrong because it's wrong to kill babies. It's that simple, right? In a day when the killing of babies is not only tolerated but celebrated by some, it's certainly accepted. And in a day when political candidates not only support abortion, but they wear the support of legalized baby killing as a badge of honor. It is the responsibility of the church to speak out. We need to let our voice be heard. We must speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Now, I'll just tell you what my personal conviction is. I will not ever knowingly vote for a person who openly supports the legalized killing of the unborn because I believe that person is disqualified from any public office. And I don't care if they're a Republican or a Democrat. You know, you guys might think, well, it's obvious which side you're siding with, but see, when I was a kid, that's not the way it worked. There were liberals on both parties. There were conservatives in both parties. There were people who were for abortion amongst the Republicans. There were people who were against abortion amongst the Democrats. This kind of sorting out process that has gone on through my whole lifetime has made it more of a Republican or a Democratic issue, but that's not how it started for me. It's an issue of the fundamental respect for human life, right? And putting it this way, I'm not trying to compel your conscience, right? You have to make up your own mind. But on this subject, I made up my mind an awful long time ago. And I don't talk about it that much because I have a hard time talking about it without crying. And I'm enough of a dude that I don't want to cry in front of everybody all the time. Right? I got a little ego thing going on here. I don't want to be up here weeping constantly, right? But if I talked about this more often, I would cry more often. Because to me, it's the hugest tragedy in our country. See, in our generation, by our generation, I'm not talking about boomers right now. I'm saying people from the mid-50s, 40s, up through the next 10, 20 years. When history looks back at us, 500, 1,000 years from now, if Jesus doesn't come back by then, when history looks back at this period in history, I don't think they're going to talk about Star Wars. And I don't think they're going to talk about the space program. And I don't think they're going to talk about the music of John Cage or the art of Jackson Pollock, right? I don't think they're going to talk about any of our accomplishments of those sorts. I think they're going to talk about the generation where the richest country in the world killed 60 million babies. Honestly, 1,000 years from now, I think they're going to look back at us and say, oh, that was a nightmare. That was a nightmare. Now, having said that, in the modern church, there are a lot of people who, for whatever reason, are pretty ambivalent on the subject, right? They find it easier to take the I'm against abortion, but I don't want to impose my views on other people point of view. Let's just for just a second, let's put that into another moral arena, the same idea, right? See how that will play. I'm against slavery, but I don't think we should make it illegal. I'm against slavery, but I'm not offended if you own a few slaves. I'm against slavery, but there are other issues that are more important. Those sound ridiculous, right? They sound heinous. They sound horrible. It's embarrassing that your pastor just said that and it's on videotape, right? But what if that guy who was pro-slavery said, and oh, by the way, I'm pro-life? Would that change your mind? It wouldn't change mine. It wouldn't matter and it shouldn't matter. Support for slavery, support for racism is a disqualifying issue. And I don't care how good your other positions are. I feel the same way about abortion. I will not vote for a person who truly believes that it's okay to kill babies, okay? I'll tell you what, I believe that abortion comes from hell. In John 10:10, Jesus reminds us that the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. And who is the thief? The thief is the devil. The devil who comes to take life. Jesus came to bring life. So let's be clear about it. Abortion comes from hell. It's the work of the devil. And those who profit from this dirty business are doing the devil's work for him. Someday they're going to answer for that. And the politicians who glibly promote it in the name of choice, right, and freedom. I can't think of any other way to say this, right? They've linked arms with Satan. And their sin is greater because they've done it just for political gain. They've done it just for power. I will not vote for a person who truly believes it's okay. Right? So we can return to the words of the text that I started with. I hate diving board sermons where you get a text and then jump off and never return to it. God commanded us to choose life. Right? This is a command for individuals, for families, for churches, for cities, for states, people, all of us. And very soon, millions of Americans are going to go to the polls and they're going to vote. And what should we do? Well, we should pray that God will guide the American people so that we will choose life in the leaders that we elect. And second, make sure you vote. You know, for those of us who have opinions on politics and talk about them and argue about them and type away about them on the internet, but don't vote, I think you've lost your right to talk about it unless you're actually exercising your right to vote. And I understand that in Vermont, if you're voting in any conservative or Republican way, it's a long shot, okay, that your vote is going to get out of this state. But it's your responsibility as an American citizen to do that. Make sure you vote and, you know, be involved in helping other people. Over the years, we've supported our crisis pregnancy center in town. That's what this is about. And yet, today was the day we were supposed to bring them all back, and I understand that not everybody has. So you won't get any demerits, okay? There won't be any marks on your permanent record. But if you can bring these back, see, this year, for whatever reason, they've changed their policy on it, and they want all the bottles back empty or full. So if anybody who's taken a bottle can remember to try to bring them back over the next couple of weeks, and I'll get these back to them sometime in February, okay? But over the years, we've supported our pregnancy crisis center here in town, and a lot of people have supported the group down in Albany. Some of us have fostered kids and adopted kids. Many of our people help with other agencies that help hurting children. See, in our fight for life, I really do believe that we need to be more than just against abortion. I think we need to be for people. I think we need to be helping people. We need to be helping the hurting wherever we find them, okay? And I'm gonna end this with one last word, okay? Abortion is not the unpardonable sin. Right. It may sound like I think that it is, but I don't. Abortion, I do believe, is a sin, but it's not the worst sin, and it's not unpardonable. It's nowhere singled out in the Bible for special treatment. Nowhere is Romans 3:23 more needed than in the discussion about abortion, because there's so much hatred over this issue that, listen, a lot of people have had abortions. And so they feel alienated from the church, and they feel isolated from God. But the Bible tells us that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. This applies to you whether you've had an abortion or not. When it comes to sin, we are all in the same boat. And I am aware that there's virtually no chance that we We don't have people here in the church who've had abortions. After a sermon like this, you may wonder how I feel about you. Well, here's my answer. I love you. I'm glad that you're part of our church family. I'm not and never will condemn you. Okay? In the end, we're all driven to the cross of Jesus. And the ground at the foot of the cross is level, right? We all stand here in need of forgiveness. And if you will just say, God, I've sinned, you know what the Father's answer is? You're forgiven. It doesn't matter what your past is. It doesn't matter what you've done or where you've been. You can be forgiven right now this morning, right here, right? So if you ever struggle with guilt because of abortion, and I know a lot of people do, I have good news for you. God loves you. He has never stopped loving you, and he never will stop loving you. The lights are on, and the door is open in the Father's house right now. He's standing at the door, and he's knocking, and he's waiting for you to open that door. So if we can have our musicians come, I'm going to step aside, and I'll be there to pray with. If you have a desire to come and just pray and kneel at the altar and pray, you are welcome to do that. I know this is a tough message to hear for some people especially. And I want to tell you that I don't deliver it lightly. I deliver it with love. And I feel like it's my responsibility to say these things.